once I made the switch to sports broadcasting, to being on the air, that play-by-play course was incredible, not only for my development, but for everybody that's going to come after me in that major. I'm so grateful that Dean made that decision to pull the trigger and to make that a major and to go full-fledged and dive into it, because it is such an up-and-coming thing. A lot of kids want to get into it, ex-athletes, kids that watch sports that, like me, aren't cut out to play sports, that just want to be around the game, have a passion for the game and things like that. And so my schooling was largely training me how to be on the air, how to set up equipment, a lot of how-to things, as opposed to voice lessons and things like that, and cadence and everything like that. I think that comes from watching games, studying other guys that do it. That's a lot of what I sort of picked up on watching games, watching the Red Sox, watching games on national TV, listening to the guys like Kevin Harlan, like Mike Breen, like Joe Davis, like Vin Scully when he was around. He was huge for me because when I first started, especially in baseball, you find yourself just calling the action and not telling a story. And that's a no-go in baseball because you have so much time to fill. And Vin Scully is hands down, bar none, the best that's ever done it in terms of storytelling, in terms of being the epitome of a baseball broadcaster. Vin Scully is that. And so anytime I could listen to him was incredible. Just try and be a sponge in that instance and sort of soak up as much as you can. But you really just find yourself marveling at him sometimes. As far as schooling, though, that's really kind of the gist of it. And I think for me, it was more so the feedback that I got from my professors, more so than what they actually taught me in the classroom. Not that that information wasn't valuable. It certainly was. Once you do it, and if you're hands-on enough with it, the feedback that you get is really, really important. And it's kind of what you do with that sort of makes you into the broadcaster you are or aren't.
I can 100% agree with that because you already mentioned feeling what it feels like to have that success. And I like to mention to people often on this podcast, especially when I have on either a professional athlete or any form of entertainer, you hear a lot of no's before you get that big yes. And it's a very rocky road to your success. You have good years, you have bad years, you have your in-between years where you're trying to figure out like what works and what doesn't. And as Brendan mentioned, it is very cutthroat in this industry, not just sports, but like entertainment in general, because there's so many people, especially nowadays with things like TikTok and all these other variations of social media. It's like everybody nowadays wants to have their own radio show, wants to have their own podcast, wants to do X, Y, and Z. And I feel like it kind of takes away from people like myself and Brendan, where we have been involved in our careers long before social media was even thought of, where we are kind of in the industry now where, yes, I use social media a lot now, but when Brendan and I were in college, I don't think there really was social media aside from just Facebook. And as we continued our careers, Instagram started coming out and all these platforms like TikTok and such are out there. The industry is becoming more competitive because everybody and their mom wants to be on air just to get like famous or whatever the case may be. But it does dilute the talent a little bit in the sense of the people that are actually passionate about wanting to be there are fighting up against these people that just want to be quote unquote famous. And I do believe in the fact that this industry is very cutthroat and you want to always do something that puts you over the edge. Like Brendan was mentioning that he still keeps in touch with some of his old mentors and professors and always working on his skill and his craft. And I try to do the same as well. And that's the best way to stay on top of things in this industry. And we will talk about that a little bit more towards the middle of this podcast special. I want to tap into your interning. I know we kind of already talked about it lately, but discuss what it was like interning and some of your jobs while you were in college and post-college. Again, I know we've already discussed some of it, but I see that you have a lengthy resume, broadcasting with a number of Massachusetts area colleges such as UMass Amherst, Merrimack College, Boston College. What exactly did you learn from each one of those experiences? And do you take any of those experiences into what you are currently doing with the High Point Rockers now?
Actually, one that's not listed on there that was the first college that I had interned, well, not interned, but really freelanced with, Bentley University. I had started doing their baseball games. I believe 2019 was the first season that I did their baseball, maybe 2018. I got to double check on that. But regardless, it was a great opportunity for me just because that was really the first time that someone had taken a chance on me outside of Dean. That wasn't an internship, that wasn't accredited. It was a paid thing. And so that was a big thing for me personally, just because I'm like, okay, somebody actually listened to my tape and said, yeah, we'll pay this guy to come in here and do our games for us. And I think anyone, once they get that first paid gig, really is like, yeah, I can do this. And so it was a big confidence thing for me more than anything. And, huge thanks to Dick Lipe, who actually does stats for the Boston Celtics. You hear him mentioned sometimes on the Celtics broadcast. He's also the SID at Bentley. He was the one that gave me that opportunity. I think that for me was step one, kind of my journey with universities around this area and trying to just get my name out there and around here. I had traveled so much for other internships to Louisiana and to Illinois for a job, granted, but still, you find in this industry that you have to go where the jobs are. Fortunately for me, I found an internship in the New England Collegiate League with the New Bedford Bay Sox, who are now no longer. But it was a professor at Dean, actually, who was the GM of that team at the time. She was a softball coach at Dean. And so had met her through John, actually, my old professor, had made that connection and said, I'm into broadcasting. I'm looking for an opportunity this summer. Would you have me? And she was like, yeah, absolutely. You're a Dean student. We want to support our students as much as we can. Would be a great opportunity. And we need somebody. So it's a good fit. And so I was lucky enough to be able to go there and do 44 games that summer. And I think the nice thing about the New England Collegiate League is the fact that you're not by yourself every night. You work with the other team's broadcaster. So you're doing a joint broadcast basically at the same time. You're doing play-by-play for 3 innings. They're doing play-by-play for 3 innings. And then you're doing play-by-play for the last 3 innings. So you break it up that way. And then the next time you see them, you flip-flop. So you'll get 3, they get 6. So it makes it fair in that regard. But also you get to kind of see other people's skill sets. You get to experience other people's style. So you can learn from them and they can learn from you. So that was what I really liked about the New England Collegiate League, is that you work with somebody new every night. And now that can pose a challenge as well, because once you get comfortable working with somebody, then you've got to go to somebody completely different the next day. And so you're kind of stepping on toes a little bit here and there and kind of got to work out, iron out the kinks, here and there. Overall, I think it is a good setup, not only to get accustomed to working with a partner, but also to kind of experience other people's work and how they present themselves on the air. I think that's a great thing to have and a nice thing that the New England Collegiate League continues to do, as far as I know today. And then to kind of transition to the Cape, that was a totally different experience for me. That was summer of 2019 that I was up there. Worked with still one of my good friends to this day, Lyle Goldstein from Arizona State. He's a big Mariners fan. I'm a Red Sox fan. We were both kind of in opposite situations baseball wise. I was coming off a World Series. He was coming off of a playoff drought that had lasted his entire school career. So I do feel sorry for him in that regard. But to talk about the Cape League, I learned so much from Lyle that summer. He had been there for a year already, so he kind of knew the ropes of the Cape League, of Hyannis. The Harbor Hawks was a team that we worked for. We saw a whole bunch of major leaguers in that season. Still some that are coming up now. I was actually in Baltimore Easter weekend, like I had mentioned a little while ago, and Jordan Westberg, who was our shortstop on that Hyannis team, he was batting ninth for the Orioles on Saturday when I was there. So that was kind of a whoa moment for me. Like, I know that guy, and he's batting for the Baltimore Orioles right now, and I'm sitting here watching him. So that kind of shows the trajectory. Hopefully I'll get there someday. Regardless, it was an incredible summer. You meet so many different people in the Cape League from all over the country, different schools, this and that. But for me, kind of what stuck out was when I first got there, you meet the opposing broadcasters as they come in, as you go to their stadiums, you exchange names where you go to school, and it's all Syracuse, Arizona State, Northwestern. I'm here from Dean College. You say that and people go, where? And I had to explain myself a lot. Well, it's a little small school, 1,300 kids, Franklin, Mass. It's not very well known at all, if it's known at all. I think I maybe got one broadcaster that have heard of it because I think he was from UMass or something like that. Other than that, nobody knows where you're from. And they kind of not look down on you, but sort of kind of like, do you belong here? And that's kind of what I had felt like at first, because I'm thinking that these kids are learning from Mike Tirico at Syracuse. Like, who am I to compete with these guys? And then it was sort of like, as you do games and, you listen to these other kids and hear their calls, they're extremely talented, but definitely felt like I was on par with them by the end of the summer. And I had started slow. I was pretty nervous and working with Lyle, who had been there for a year already. I didn't want to kind of step over him. I wanted him to have the authority. He came from a larger program. He had already had all these classes, whereas I was just getting into my sports broadcasting major. And so I sort of felt like I really didn't belong at first. And I was like, am I really equipped to be here? Like, am I supposed to be here? Like, it really was one of those kind of like slap in the face moments. Like, is this for me? And you hit those bumps in the road. And Brittany, I'm sure you've had those where it's like, okay, am I really meant to do this? Is this the right path for me? me? Am I going to make it? Like, you have all those questions, but you just got to keep going and really have that belief in yourself. And that's kind of some advice that I would tell anyone that's looking to get into this is you're going to have speed bumps. It's not going to be smooth sailing the entire time. And as Brittany said earlier, you get a lot of no's before you get that one yes. And all it takes is just one. And you just got to endure all those no's, endure all those hard days, and it'll all be worth it at some point. It's just a matter of getting there. That can be the tough part, but also the rewarding part in the same aspect of when you do get that job, when you do land that gig, it makes it that much better. So that's what I would say I learned from the Cape League is that it's not all sunshine and roses, because my first season working in the New England Collegiate League, got to do my own thing. I was in charge of the broadcast. I ran this, I ran that. I did setup. I did everything. And then in the Cape League, it was totally different. It was like, bam, you're hitting reality. And it's like, these kids are extremely talented. They move really fast and you've got to keep up and you've got to learn how to keep up. And so that was a really good learning experience for me being in the Cape League in 19.
Well, thank you so much for sharing so many of your experiences. And we are going to be segueing eventually into how you ended up in High Point with the High Point Rockers. I was actually going to ask you any advice to those tuning in right now that have thought about becoming a play-by-play announcer, but aren't too sure how to actually tap into it or where to get started. You are not weird for having those thoughts in your mind and playing back that constant critiquing in your head of, is this for me? Am I doing good? What else can I learn? How do I put myself over the edge to be better than the person sitting next to me? And to be honest with you, it gives me the chills as I talk about it. Those are some of the best people that are great at their job because you see the passion and they follow their dreams and their goals. And they're going to be those people, or those specific individuals are the ones that tend to go far in their career because they aren't afraid when they hear no. They take that as, okay, I'm competitive. It's all right. I heard no this time. I'm going to go and work a little bit harder and I know I'll get that yes eventually. So I feel like most careers, but especially this career in general, it's definitely cut out for people that have a thick skin in a multitude of ways of hearing the many no's and eventually getting that yes. Also working with people next to you that are going to be critiquing you. And not only the people working with you that are critiquing you, your fan base and your listeners. And I don't want to talk about that part just yet. We're going to segue into that shortly.
I think it depends on kind of what stage you're at. I think, honestly, really, regardless, I think it sort of encompasses everyone, whether you're in high school, college, post college, looking to get into it, find an opportunity. And if you can't find an opportunity, make your own opportunity. Because, I mean, Brittany, like we talked about earlier, social media has made it so easy for anyone really to get on the air, to have some sort of a platform, to create content, to start your own podcast, to even call a game. There are websites out there that stream games and that have people call them, and it's like a chat room and people join and they listen to you. Even if you just record it into the voice memos on your phone, if you've got an iPhone, and know they have them. I'm not sure about Android, never had an Android, but I'm sure they've got some sort of recording device on there. Prop that up, put a game on, mute it, and call it. That's really all you have to do to sort of get reps. I think that's the best thing that you can do when you're first starting, is just get as much practice as you possibly can in any facet, any regard, however you want to do it, whether it's with an actual company, whether it's with a streaming service, whether it's with a team, whether it's an internship, whatever it is. That's the best way that I can suggest to get into it, is just find an opportunity. That's what I had to do when I started in high school with those cable access games, is that I didn't even know that it had existed. And I honestly forget how I found out, but I did, and sent an email and got a yes. And, look what happened. So I think that's the best way that I know how to do it, that I would suggest for anyone to do it. If I was starting over again, I wish I had all these different, platforms at my disposal. Social media was prevalent when I started college, but it wasn't anything like it is now with these streaming services and all of this stuff to sort of get your feet wet and dive into it with no experience. It really, really is that easy. Create your own path and create your own content now, as opposed to 10 years ago. For anybody that's looking to get into it, that's what I would suggest. Find an opportunity and be consistent. You can't do it once or twice and then expect opportunities to come flooding in. You've got to be real consistent. It takes a long time. It takes practice. It takes hard work. It takes dedication, all of that to really land, where you want to be eventually. And all of us are still trying to continue to climb. There's never an end destination. If you've got a dream job in mind, keep working. And, that's really all you can do to try and make it happen. That's all any of us can do. Finding that first opportunity is the first step to get into it, definitely.
That is some great tips and advice. And I want to segue into this particular topic because I feel like a lot of people that are watching or listening to a broadcast or even watching professional athletes, there's always somebody critiquing and saying, oh, I could do that better, or I could have done that, or I could do this, and people don't really understand how much actually goes into a live broadcast or what most professional athletes, what they went through to get to where they're at. So we'll talk about that briefly. Some of the pressures that kind of fall on us as announcers or being, in my case, an on-field host. And I'm live on field in front of thousands of people at a time. And if I mess up, everybody's watching me, right? I can't go back and hit the rewind button. So it's just all about like learning how to go with the flow and do your thing. And I know Brendan is kind of the same way. Although he's up in a booth, he has thousands of people listening to him. So he's hoping that he's not going to mess up while he's doing his recording.
That's the hope anyway.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? The hope is you hope to not mess up, but at the same time, everybody is human and everybody makes mistakes. So with that being said, I feel like a lot of people that have never done our type of job before think that it's quote unquote easy, when in fact, I will argue that it's not. In my opinion, a lot of it is a God-given talent, like I've said earlier, a natural skill set, and mixed with some training, of course. Whether that training be self-taught, mainly like what I do myself, or a mix of schooling and training like Brendan has done and is still doing. So I want to discuss voice inflection. I will define it. And I don't know if Brendan uses voice inflection that much with his job, but I know that I use voice inflection all the time. You can kind of hear me right now. I am using voice inflection. I am raising my voice a little bit, punching certain words, stopping when I need to, taking a certain breath, and trying to be as fluid with my words as possible without stumbling over anything that I'm saying. Define what voice inflection is. Voice inflection describes various changes in your voice when you are speaking. In addition to the volume level at which you speak, inflection also includes tone, pace, pitch, and modulation or intonation of the words that come out of your mouth. I like to describe voice inflection as how you are getting across to your audience your own voice, but also engaging that audience. When I am using voice inflection, it is totally different than when I'm just normally hanging out and talking to my friends. The reason why I say that is when you do voice inflection, kind of like a singer, and again, I couldn't sing to save my life, but I actually have to practice my vocal cords. I've recently started working on my vocal cords because if you don't stretch your vocal cords and practice that voice inflection, you can actually get laryngitis or lose your voice. And I had to learn that the hard way. And I don't know if Brendan can talk about that as well, if he actually works his voice at all. If you are using that voice inflection constantly, the up, down, speaking into a microphone, it definitely does a number on your vocal cords. So I feel this is a very key aspect in any job that involves being on air, television, radio, podcasting, etc. Being able to enunciate words properly, speak clearly, limiting certain accents when needed, being cautious over not stumbling over words too often. How do you make sure that you are working on all of those skills consistently? And have you ever had a bout with losing your voice?
So actually, yes, the first time that I ever really almost encountered it was last season. I had done seasons where, I've had 66 games, 44 games, really 66 games in Peoria was the most that I had ever done because, I didn't travel with the team. I only did home games. We only had 66 home games and that was what I worked. And so that was the longest season that I had ever had. And so obviously you go from that to 130 games last year, you're kind of like, whoa, June hits and, you're doing a game every day and it's hot, it's humid and, you're talking for 3 hours a night. And there was one day I woke up and I had called my mom. I hadn't said anything that entire morning. And the first thing I said was hi. And I had like this raspy voice and I was like, whoa, that can't happen. That's not going to work for me. So had to get some cough drops and a bunch of water and guzzle that and take a few cough drops and ended up being okay for that night game. And, the next couple days had to do the same routine and try and get the throat back to feeling normal, sore, dry, whatever the case is, happens a lot. Got to try and find that routine to take care of your voice because it really is your livelihood when you're in this industry, especially, you and I, Brittany, we depend on our voice to make money. So for me, I never had encountered that and, ever really. And I just thought that drinking enough fluids would be enough. And that's really all that I had ever done and thought to do. Never lozenges or anything like that. Never had to use them. I felt fortunate in that regard, to be honest with you. I know a lot of people do many things to take care of their voice, tea and all this other stuff. I never had to do that. So now I carry around a bag of cough drops with me on the road and things like that for instances if that ever does happen. Knock on wood, it doesn't. But it's natural when you're talking for 3 hours a night, 6 days a week. You're going to lose your voice at some point. It's going to become raspy. Your throat's going to get dry. It's just how it goes. It's the nature of the beast. And so that's what I would say for that. Pretty fortunate. I've never had any real encounters with laryngitis or losing my voice or anything. I feel like I might be jinxing myself here, but hope not. It should be fresh after an off season to get going April 25th and carry it for a while at least. So we'll see.
I just wanted to talk about that because I had my first experience with it, at least with the Rockers, my first season with them. And I have lost my voice a number of times previously with other jobs. Noticed with the Rockers that because we had like 6 or 7 games in a row, and I think it was also due to the fact that April and High Point or in North Carolina in general, lots of pollen in the air. So if you have bad allergies, that is also already causing inflammation and messing with your body. I lost my voice and I couldn't actually be on field for a couple of days because my voice was so raspy. And I was like, oh no, like, how do I prevent this? So I started learning that if I kind of like work my vocal cords off and on like a singer, especially in the off season to like get my voice used to like that constant inflection and like speaking how I am kind of now, that it definitely helps me out. Like Brendan mentioned too, cough drops. If we have 6 or 7 games in a row, I definitely will. Brendan's going to probably laugh. Bren, here's a tip for you. If we have 6 or 7 games in a row, I sometimes will take honey, like actual honey, melt it in the microwave and then dump it down my throat and like swirl it around. I feel like it coats the back of my throat. If the cough drops don't do the job, honey definitely will. And honestly, sometimes just like drinking warm water, not just, I feel like cold water will like close up your throat a little bit, but any type of like room temperature or warm water is helpful. And again, because like Brendan's speaking about, right? You're talking for 3 hours at a time. I myself am not on air for 3 hours at a time, but when I am not doing hits on the field, it's not like I'm not talking to anybody. I'm walking around saying hello to the fans. I'm walking up to the press box. I'm getting ready for my post-game interviews or whatever I'm doing. So like I, for the most part, am using my voice most of the game as well. So I've had to learn to work my vocal cords and do those little tips and tricks like with the honey and the warm water and the cough drops and things like that. I'm happy that we are speaking about that because this is kind of like the behind the scenes stuff that you all as viewers or listeners probably don't know much about. And I'm sure you guys are tuning in, getting a little bit of a laugh out of us as well. So yeah, so it sounds like you do a good job at working on your skills consistently and working on your voice. Let's talk a little bit about how to say players' names properly, because I know that is really tricky. So first off, how do you even learn how to say certain players' names? Do you have to look them up in how they enunciate it, or do you listen to how other commentators say specific names? Because I know that's one of the trickiest things to do is, the game of baseball, right? Like you talk about it often, the plays and things like that, but every player and every team, that there's 1 or 2 people, Brendan, that somebody's name, you're like, dang, do I say it like this or like this? And if I say it the wrong way, I'm going to get criticized. So how do you learn how to say specific players' names properly? What's the trick to that?
So I think that really you're working at a school from SIDs, from coaches, things like that. For me, with the Rockers anyway, our communications director, Steve Shutt, he's fantastic. He helps me, makes my life 1,000 times easier. So largely I go to him on pronunciation. And if I have to, I'll go to the opposing manager. I've done that a couple of times. And even the player themselves. Like when I was at Bentley, there was a player whose name I didn't know how to pronounce. Went down to the field during batting practice, found him and said, hey man, how do you pronounce your last name? And he told me. I said, okay, thank you. And some players normally are very receptive to that and want to give you that information, because if you're saying the wrong name, it impacts their tape for scouting, and their family watching gets annoyed by it and things like that. And not only does it annoy them, but it hurts your own credibility, because it makes you look ill prepared. So that's kind of what I am fearful of, and never want to stumble on a name or mispronounce a name. And it'll happen occasionally, but if you're doing it consistently, like do it once and then you don't do it again, you say pardon me, or apologize for that, or whatever it is, and you move on. But if you're doing it for 5, 6 innings or 2 or 3 quarters of a game, people are going to catch on and be like, I don't think that's how you say that. Like lesson, it happened this past offseason season, actually, when I was doing a football game at Assumption University. And funny enough, it was the quarterback's name. So obviously, you're saying the quarterback's name every single snap. And, I had been given the wrong pronunciation guide, not to make excuses because I should have known or corrected myself. It was both myself and the public address announcer that were saying the name wrong for 3 quarters of the game. And it wasn't until there was a timeout in the third quarter that there was a knock on the press box door, and it was the quarterback's mom. And I'm drawing a blank on the name now, but it was one of those names with the EIWCZ, one of those names. And so those become pretty hard to pronounce sometimes. She was super nice about it, couldn't have been any more cordial about it, and said, hey, folks at home have been listening to the broadcast, and, they had noticed that you've been pronouncing my son's name wrong. And I didn't know that this was the quarterback's mom at the time. Said, oh, okay, no problem. I'm so sorry about that. Who's your son? And she goes, the quarterback. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. How did we not catch that? And so, all you can do is apologize and, correct yourself going forward. But for the rest of the game, that's all I could think about was, man, like that was 75% of that game. I'm calling the quarterback by the wrong name. And I was just beating myself up about it. And it's not entirely my fault. And I'm not going to sit here and point blame at anybody because it's not really anyone's fault. I mean, anyone should have caught it and said, hey, I think this is how we should say this. It could have been any one of us. Mistakes happen and just got to brush it off and move on from it. And that sort of stuff will happen too for anybody that's listening out there. It's not all smooth. All the information you get may not be correct. You've got to do your own homework sometimes, as I should have. And so that's one of those instances where all you can do is apologize and trudge forward. And that's what I had to do for the rest of that game, but did feel terrible about it. Sure, the kid went back and watched the game and said, that's not my name. What is this guy doing? This guy doesn't know anything. So hopefully I was able to make amends and correct that, for the rest of that game. But that's one of those times where you've got to be prepared and you really can't do anything but put your head down and keep moving forward.
I agree with that 100%. And sometimes it's tricky because if you're given the name on how you think it's supposed to be said, and if you've never heard that name before, how are you supposed to know other than what is already being given to you? Somebody like me who is getting ready to do a post-game interview, and it's very usually on the fly at this point. Most of the time by week 2, I try to learn how to say all the players' names properly. And obviously it just takes like a lot of studying or listening to how the in-game announcer is saying the names. That's how I tend to learn the players' names and how to say them, is I'll actually pay attention to our in-game announcer when they're like, now batting is blah, 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 or now heading to the mound is blah, blah, blah. So I'll try to pay attention to that. That way, when I'm doing a quick on the fly post-game interview, I try my best to not butcher the names, because also bear in mind, a lot of the times I don't know who my post-game interview is going to be until literally speaking with Steve Shutt, making sure I'm saying the name properly. What questions might they want me to ask? And I don't have that much time to prepare because, again, it could be a 3-up, 3-down inning, or it could be a walk-off home run. So I feel like there's very much so like pressure to say things properly. And what I like to do, this is my little tip, is I like to have notes on my phone where I can like look down, and I ad lib a lot. Obviously that's part of my job, is being able to ad lib and have fun with the crowd. So yeah, it's very much on the fly. And if you butcher somebody's name, kind of just hope that not a lot of people notice unless you're doing it or saying it constantly. But just realize that there is always a next game. There is always a next play, and you can correct yourselves. You can't get down on yourself for 1 or 2 mistakes, because again, they're going to happen. None of us are perfect, and we do have the occasional slip up, as Brendan and I are speaking about. How do you handle occasional slip ups when they are live? I know Brendan kind of already told us a personal story, but are there any ways that you like to handle occasional slip ups when you are live? And then also, after we discuss that, we'll kind of talk about how we both deal with people critiquing us, because we are in the public eye, and obviously that's inevitable.
Especially in our profession, you're talking for 3 hours a night on the air on a broadcast like myself. For me, I think that a lot of times you've just got to be able to poke fun at yourself, depending on what it is. I mean, if it's a slip up with call or something like that, that's a little different. If you just get tongue tied in the middle of a sentence, you can poke fun at yourself. A little bit of a tongue twister there, or easy for me to say. And that's one I go to a lot, is easy for me to say. But, I think folks get a laugh at that because they understand that it happens. And earlier in my career, I would have said that, beat myself up over it, and I get really upset about it and kick myself and things like that, where now it's almost like you have to understand that it's going to happen. Like, you're not perfect, you're not superhuman, you're not a computer, you're human, you're going to make a mistake. Depending on how many times it happens during the course of a game becomes that its own issue. If it happens 2 3 times, then I get upset, because it's like, well, okay, you've got to focus here. You kind of got to get it together a little bit. It's going to happen. You're not going to be perfect for 9 innings every single night. You're going to have that slip up. And honestly, I've had people tell me that it's the most minor things that I notice, because I'm a perfectionist and I like to have everything go smoothly and 100% no matter what. But people sometimes don't even notice it. And it's really only you that picks up on it and is like, man, I stumbled over that one word, and that would have made that sentence a whole lot better, or that transition better, or call better, whatever it is. As far as handling critique goes, I don't really even pay attention to it, to be honest with you. I mean, not that I feel like I get a ton. I don't really see it if I do. But if I do see it, I just kind of laugh at it, because it's like, you try sitting up there and doing what I do, and see how easy it is. It's not. We talked about that earlier. Not everybody can do what we do. That's not to brag and say that, we're better than anybody, because I don't think that at all. But it's not an easy job. It does take practice. It does take a lot of hard work. It does take a lot of preparation. And not everyone understands that. And so I think that when I get critiqued and people say, oh, that call stunk, or, that was boring, or, whatever it is, I just brush it off now at this point. And again, when I was younger, I probably would have taken more offense to it, but now it's part of it, comes with the territory, comes with the profession. You can't make everybody happy. So I think if you know that going in, I think it makes it that much easier to kind of just par for the course and be yourself. And it makes it easy to kind of be carefree and do your thing.
Definitely cannot make everybody happy. And it kind of makes it a little bit more fun and entertaining if you do get critiqued a little bit by the fans, not in a rude way, because we obviously don't want to consistently see like rude critiquing, because at that point it's just people being rude. But like when you have like the fun heckling, like on social media or something like that, like that's okay, but you don't want to hear things like that consistently. So for those of you that are tuning in, whether it's Brendan or I or anybody that you are critiquing, we get it. Like that's part of the entertainment, and people like to poke fun at, like people do with the athletes too that are on TV that might have fumbled a ball or struck out or something. Like it's not just us fans. Part of why they're watching is because they have an opinion. So we totally understand that as well. You guys take the microphone playfully and see how you do with it, or practice and see how easy or not easy you think it might be to walk out onto a field live and speak to a couple thousand people without fumbling over your words, making sure you hit a certain sponsor on cue, and making sure you're not tripping over your own feet, making sure that you're out there and you have only 30 seconds to get all of these words out. What I do on the field, it comes off as easy, probably to most people that are watching, but I'm telling you guys right now, if I were to hand you the microphone and said, okay, you're 45 seconds to get out here, make sure that the kids are in place, you say all these rules to the game properly, you announce the sponsor a couple times, and you don't trip over your own feet, you don't face plant, and you make sure you engage the fans. I'm telling you guys, it's not as easy as it might appear. And it only appears easy because Brendan and I practice it. And as we start to wrap up and talk about the High Point Rockers a little bit, any final words on how your career in sports broadcasting got started?
I would just say that I've had a lot of help, and I'm extremely grateful for it. Anyone that's in this industry can't get to their ultimate goal without some assistance. And for me, I've been so grateful. I mean, I mentioned my parents earlier. They're top of the list. John Rook is up there, my professor. Everybody that I've met along the way, from my bosses in Louisiana to Peoria to with High Point now with Pete Fish and Steve Shutt. Everyone has assisted me to get to this point, and hopefully will continue to be behind me as I make my way through the rest of my career. So I would say that I'm extremely lucky. I've been in the right place at the right time a couple of times, so that's worked in my favor too. And I just feel really fortunate to be able to continue to do what I love for this long, and hopefully, make a steady career out of it for as long as I want to do it.
That segues perfectly into the High Point Rockers. You are currently working for the High Point Rockers. You were there last season. I know obviously that you are coming back for the 2024 season. How did you find yourself in High Point? How did you look for that job, find that job, get accepted for that job? And what have you enjoyed most so far about being the High Point Rockers voice?
For a lot of people coming off the pandemic, cold emails were really popular just because there weren't a ton of job postings. There weren't many people leaving their jobs because of that comfortability, and the market was kind of, up in the air and not really sure how much turnover there was going to be from off season to off season for a couple of years. And so for me, I really just took a shot in the dark and kind of emailed a whole bunch of teams, and High Point was one of them. And I had gotten a response from Steve, and he said, let's set up a time to chat. Send me your stuff. I'll be in touch next week at some point. And he was, a formal interview over the phone, again over Zoom, and then one final one with Pete Fish, the team president. And that's kind of how it went. And so it was a couple of days later that they had gotten back to me and said, we'd like to offer you the job. And I was over the moon because, for as long as I can remember from when I started doing this, even from back when I was doing cable access basketball games, I've always wanted to be the voice of a professional baseball. And that was the end goal for me up until I got to that goal, was working with a pro baseball team. And that's ultimately where I am right now with the Rockers. And I can't say enough good things about the organization, about the people here, from the top down, from Pete to Steve to Jamie Keefe, our field manager, Frank Viola, our pitching coach, all the players, the fans, the staff, everyone has just been first class. The organization as a whole is run incredibly smoothly. I think we have the best operation in the Atlantic League, bar none. Night in, night out, you can see it. And Brittany, you're right at the forefront of it. You experience all of that, as far as on-field presentation goes, but also behind the scenes too. I think that, start to finish during the day really couldn't go any smoother. And I think that a lot of teams would be lucky to have what we have in High Point. And I feel very, very fortunate to be a part of it. To be able to be on the air every night with the passionate fan base that we have, with the group of guys that we have playing on the field, I feel so, so lucky, especially last year, being as good of a team as we were and a group as good of a group as they were to work with. You felt like you had a chance to win every single night. Everyone was in a good mood every day because of that. It made my job easier. I'm sure it made it more entertaining for the fans. It was a packed house seemingly every day, every time we were home. The High Point fans are the best, in the league, hands down, no questions asked. We have loyal listeners who tune in every single night. They interact with the broadcast. They ask the questions. They keep up with the injury report. They keep me on my toes because, I've had fans ask me questions. Hey, DJ fouled the ball off his toe yesterday. How's he doing? And I have to have an answer for that. Xander's been out of the lineup a couple of days dealing with a wrist. What's his status? And so things like that. Mention, DJ's on base streak. Mention, Ben's playing the outfield last night. Mention, Ryan closing in on, record number of saves and things like that. Fans want to know about. And so I have to have that information. And then that just shows the passion of the fans, which is just incredible, especially for an independent league team as well. I think because of the fact that there is no major league team around the area, really. Atlanta comes to mind as a close one, but really there is no major league team. So fans sort of kind of gravitate to whatever baseball they can, put their eyes on. And I think High Point provides some of the best entertainment value in the area. I would put it right up there competing with anything in the Triad area. So, and to be a part of that has been a blessing, and I'm really, really looking forward to this year. I think we've got a great group. I think that we'll be right in the mix again for a championship, hopefully. Fingers crossed for that. I think if we have the same passion, the same everything that we had last year, and just go full steam ahead again, there's no reason we can't replicate what we did last year and have a fantastic season.
The last couple seasons that I've been with the High Point Rockers, they have had a fantastic and phenomenal team. This year, I know the group of guys will be a little bit different. We will have some people, or some players, should I say, coming back from the last couple seasons since I've been there. I'm going into my third season with the High Point Rockers myself, being the on-field host. We've had some guys retire. My husband recently retired, and he is actually on our coaching staff. Bo Taylor, I'm kind of upset to see him go. He was one of our most notable catchers. He actually just recently took a job with the Tacoma Rainiers, and to see some of those like staple players up and leave and retire and move on with their careers, it's great to see it because you're happy and excited to see what their next career move is, but you're also sad and upset. I guess I'm speaking from kind of like a fan's perspective, because you're so used to seeing these players perform so well, and you're like, dang, I wonder who's going to fill their spot, or I wonder how the team is going to do without having certain people there. I know Brendan understands that too, not just with the High Point Rockers, but in general, when you're watching your favorite ice hockey or NBA team or whatever the case may be, when you see some of your favorite players get traded somewhere, or they go out for the season because of an injury, or they just plain old retire, you're like, oh man, like I've been watching these people for a couple seasons now, and you get to know their personalities and how they perform on the field, and you're kind of sad to see them go. But anyways, as we start to kind of like wrap up this podcast episode, Brendan, you've been doing fantastic. I hope to have you on here again at some point, but I'm sure you've had many memories, or fantastic memories, while being in High Point so far. What do you wish to accomplish while in High Point as far as your own personal career? And what do you enjoy most about the High Point community? And I also would like to know what the heck you do for fun in North Carolina on your off days.
Well, I'll start with that. I mean, we don't get many off days during the season, right? I mean, I think that Mondays is typically the league-wide off day, so I like to golf a lot. Not very good, but I do enjoy it. So anytime that I can get out there and play some golf is relaxing to me. That's usually what I do on my off days. Try and do some other stuff, grocery shop, that kind of thing. Really, off days are golf in the morning and then logistics stuff after that. So not really much time for anything else besides baseball, really. As far as what I hope to accomplish, really is just give fans an enjoyable experience. I think that's the goal for any person in broadcasting, is to bring fans a unique perspective on the game, enlighten them on some of these players and then their, how they are personally, because, I think fans know these guys as athletes more so than they know them as people. Kind of similar to what you and I are doing on this podcast right now is getting to know us a little more behind the scenes, more than what they see on the air. But that's really the same sort of story when I'm working, trying to convey these player stories, where they come from, their background, things like that, and to kind of paint them as more than just a baseball player, more than just a first baseman, more than a pitcher, things like that. That's kind of what I hope to really accomplish personally as far as my career goes while I'm in High Point. I think that independent baseball is overshadowed a lot by minor league baseball and Major League Baseball, obviously. Indie ball, I think, is looked at sometimes as not as competitive. The talent level isn't as high. I would argue that it's right up there with AAA talent, because you've got a lot of guys in this league that are ex-major leaguers, guys that have won Gold Gloves, guys that have won Silver Sluggers. They've all played in this league. Guys that have won World Series have played in this league. It's a very prestigious league, and I think people sort of they overlook that sometimes. A lot of times, I think. Even for me, I think that's also something that I'd like to do, is sort of give people a better perspective on what the Atlantic League is, who plays in it. But it's not a league for amateurs. It is very much professional baseball at a very, very high level. As many fans as possible tune into our broadcast, and to understand that, I think that I'm doing my job pretty well. As far as what I enjoy, the last part of that question, enjoy most about High Point and the Triad area in North Carolina. I touched upon the fan base earlier. I'm going to touch on it again. It's incredible, the support that the Rockers get from not just the games. I think that's the one that stands out. That's the easy one. But I think the other stuff in the community, the Coy Willard Golf Tournament that we had last year, there were fans showing up for that. There were people showing up, packing the Paddlist Club at the luncheons, the season ticket holder luncheons. Those are always sold out. Different things that we do in the community, fans show up. They just do. They care. They are involved with this team. They're involved in the community. And Brittany, I think you alluded to it earlier, as a family. I think that's probably a great way to put it, because a lot of these fans, they're season ticket holders. They're there every single night. Every time the gates open, they're walking in. They know us, they know the staff, they know the faces, they know the names, and you don't really see that everywhere. And stops that I've been, at least, that doesn't happen. People will stop me on the concourse. I'm going to get my pregame meal. Brendan, hey, liked your call last night. You do a great job. Hey, thanks. I've never met these people in my life, but you introduce yourself to them. They know you from doing your job, but then you get to kind of experience meeting them in person at a game, understanding their appreciation for what you do, and you have that same mutual respect for them for tuning in and making what you do relevant. So I think that's the best way that I can put it for the appreciation that I have for the Rockers fan base. It's been fantastic, and can't wait to get down there again and experience it for a second season.
What is your next move? And by move, I'm obviously speaking about career. So what is your ultimate career goal? Obviously, you're now here in High Point. This will be your second season with them. When do you plan on making your next career move? And will it be in baseball? Will it be with another sport? What is your ultimate, I don't want to use the word or the terminology 5-year plan, because I feel like that's so cliche and tacky, so I won't word it in that way. But what is your ultimate, I guess, career goal and career move, and what sport, and where would you be?
That's a tough question. It's a good question. I think for me, I love baseball. It's my passion. It always will be. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into anything, but I think if I had it my way, I would be in baseball somewhere. That's not to say if the right opportunity in another sport didn't come along, I wouldn't consider it. I can't really put a timetable on when that next move will be. I don't think that's fair. I think for right now, I'm focused on the Rockers season and doing the best I can in 24. But I do love baseball. The ultimate goal for me is a major league broadcast booth someday, regardless of where it is. I think as a kid you dream of playing for your favorite team. I think for me that equivalent is broadcasting for my favorite team. So like if I ever got the call from the Red Sox, that would be full circle, life complete, done everything I could hope to do. That's bar none the best scenario I could ever imagine. But But I also know that that's not necessarily realistic and that my career is going to take me other places as far as what the future holds. I hope that it's, in baseball. I'd love to have it be in baseball, but I don't necessarily want to commit to that because I do enjoy other sports. It's just a matter of kind of, like I said earlier, going where the jobs are, where the opportunities present themselves. But for right now, I'm focused on the Rockers and doing the best I can for High Point and for the fans.
That is an amazing answer. And of course, I had to ask that because I knew our Rockers fan base would be intrigued knowing somebody that, like yourself, a young man that has just recently graduated college a couple years ago. Obviously, your ultimate goal is to probably not stick with just one team until you retire. Most people in sports will bounce around for a little bit until they find their favorite location, whether that be making your way back up to Boston or if you want to venture out to California at some point. Like, everybody tends to bounce around a little bit in their careers, especially in the entertainment industry at the beginning. But we are lucky and happy to have you here with us. I love the High Point community, and I fully enjoy working with the High Point Rockers just as you do as well. Brendan, I loved having you on here for this 2-part podcast special. I feel like it was much needed. I needed to get to know you a little bit because, again, you and I kind of lightly cross paths all the time, but you're up in the booth and I'm on the field. So I enjoyed getting to know you. And I know for sure my listeners and, of course, the High Point Rockers fans fully enjoyed getting to know you behind the scenes. My goal as an on-field fun personality is to have you all get to know my special guest, whether it be somebody from the High Point Rockers or whoever I'm interviewing. You guys get to know them behind the scenes, a little bit about their career, where they're from, their family life. And I feel like learning about people's lives, you have such a fun grasp on who they are aside from just their career. And as we wrap up, Brendan, shout out your social media if you so choose to. And also Flow Sports. How can people listen to your radio broadcasts or watch them on TV this upcoming baseball season, which will be starting this month of April?
The Rockers broadcast is a plug for that. You can listen audio only on MixLR. It's a free audio app. You can download it on your phone. There's a website you can go to as well. Stay tuned on the Rockers social media platforms as well, Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it these days, Facebook as well. We'll have links to both Flow Sports and the MixLR broadcast when it comes time to launch those in a couple of weeks. The exhibition game against Gastonia at Truist Point, I believe, will be on Flow Sports. It definitely will be streamed audio at the very least. Audio is MixLR. It's totally free. As for Flow Sports, I don't know what the subscription fee will be this year. Last year, I know it was $29.99 a month, but that link will be posted as well when it comes time for that too. So stay tuned on the Rockers social media platforms for those. As for me, my Twitter is Brendan Howe _. My Facebook, just search Brendan Howe. You should find me a picture with a headset on. Should be easy enough. Look for a guy from Boston that broadcasts. That's all you really need to search for there. And so, yeah, if you want to follow me there, I post a lot of Rockers content throughout the season, interviews, different things like that, pitching matchups, all that good stuff, lineups, and so forth. So stay tuned for that. Can't wait to get going in a couple of weeks. And Brittany, I can't thank you enough for having me.